In a world full of experts telling you what to do, the hardest and most radical thing you can do is to trust yourself.
I think the vital point is trust yourself. Really trust your own knowing when you feel it deep within you, no matter what's being said around you or being influenced, that we are able to trust ourselves and turn toward that trusted.
Welcome to The Vital Point. I'm Jonathan Schechter, breathwork facilitator, integration coach, and fellow traveler on the path of healing and growth. The show is here to inspire real action in your life, whether you're just beginning or deep on your journey. You'll hear practical tools, guided practices, and conversations with those walking the path, because the truth is, transformation only happens through action. That's the vital point. So let's take a deep breath. And let's begin. My guest today is Diana Medina, lead trainer for Groff Transpersonal Training, the organization that certifies facilitators in holotropic breathwork. Diana worked directly with the founders, Stanislav and Christina Groff, and later with Tav and Carrie Sparks, who carried the work forward after Stan passed GTT onto them. She's taught GTT modules and led holotropic breathwork sessions all over the world, and has been a core teacher in nearly all of my own training. I'm honored to share this conversation with you. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and leave a comment or review to let me know what you think. Diana Medina, welcome to the Vital Point podcast. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's really a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, it's so nice to get to spend a little extra time. We just were in Lucerne Valley for a module with the holotropic breathwork training just recently. How have things been for you since you've gotten home?
Pretty good. I also work in the medical field, so I kind of just jumped right back into life here. Um, but I felt really good about the module, and it was such a pleasure being there with the group. And every time I teach these modules, I feel like I learned something new every time from all of you. So it was great. I've been doing well.
Yeah. Anything that you'd like to share that you learned this time around?
Yeah, I think it was just a sort of another round of learning trust in the flow in the group sort of energy. Sometimes Stan or Tab would call it sort of the collective inner healing wisdom as a group that comes together. And it's every time it's a little different because we're a different configuration of people that come together. And this time I felt just like more like something dropped in, and this is for me, the group's great. It's more me, like, I felt like I dropped in sort of embodying the material a little more, which then allowed me to, you know, try to express what it meant, the material to me. So, every time is different depending on how surrendered I am to spirit and how that comes out of my mouth. I don't think too much, although I have to know information, obviously. My cognitive is engaged. But the truth is, most of it comes just from my heart and my body and my own lived experience, and also my experience of supporting others as they uncover and discover this whole paradigm for themselves. So, yeah, it just felt deeper to me personally. Mhm.
Do you find that, like, that's developed more over time? Like, when did you feel sort of embodied with that? Because I would imagine, like, the first time teaching, there's a little
Yeah.
bit more nervousness, or you're trying to remember all the beats and things like that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, my first module I taught was a music module, and it was one of the first modules that neither Stan nor Tab were teaching. So I felt this huge amount of pressure, and the depth and the width of the information that has to be given is kind of crazy. So as a student, I took my responsibility very seriously, and I studied for months and months and listened to recordings of Tav teaching the module. And I was in my room, completely panicked before the group started. Almost, I've never had a panic attack, but that I felt like, oh my gosh, who do I think I am that I can do this? Because in my opinion, Stan and Tav are two some best teachers in the world as far as this sort of huge wealth of information that they have to offer. And so, yeah, it was pretty that first one, it was like I was trying to cross the T's and dot the I's. And every day I'd pray my ass off, to be totally honest. And the last day as the group closed, I went to my room and I fell to my knees and thanked Spirit for getting me through it. Um, and then since then, as I've each one, the next year was better. It deepens every time, and I've been teaching now for I don't know, at least quite a few years. So I'm happy that it still is deepening as it's a living principle. So it just deepens as I change in my own life experiences, my experiences with people on the mat, and their experiences, teach me. And yeah, so it definitely deepens. But the first one, I would say I was not so embodied. It was probably more coming from here. And then after that, definitely it became more and more embodied, the information.
Wow. So, we're touching into your realm of expertise, right? The holotropic breathwork modality. And that's, at least in the Western world, one of the oldest, sort of original styles or modes of breathwork. And now it seems like there's new breathwork trainings and brands popping up every day. I've found personally the depth of the holotropic breathwork container to be so vast, especially in comparison to other things that I've experienced. What do you think makes holotropic breathwork have that depth and that um, potential for transformation for participants, maybe in comparison to some of these other things that are popping up today?
Mhm. Well, I think it's really, of course, it's borrowed from very old traditions. So it's not a discovery of something new. It's more like a reinvention of old traditions, ancient indigenous traditions for millennium. So, so our roots are very deep, and we I'm really trying to think about this. I think there's different pieces of it. I think one piece of it is that as a facilitator, as you become a facilitator in the training, it is absolutely required that we die to what we think we know about ourselves and others, and that we have to do our own work. This work is a death rebirth model and a continual death rebirth model. So we continue to die to whom we think we are, a knowing of ourselves, a knowing of the world, and then we're born to a new knowing continually over and over. So that is what ancient tradition that models. It's modeled after that, the death rebirth model. So given that, it continually has the capacity to be surprised and to grow and to stretch, and the container gets bigger and stronger. And the irony, the paradox of that, in my opinion, is it all becomes more malleable. Like also becomes more flexible and holding more because people's experiences and their own knowings is what informs the container. So it's relational in that way. And with a lot of trainings, I mean, most trainings I've been through, you have to keep learning. It is required to keep learning. I don't know. I haven't been trained in other breath works, so I can only speak from the holotropic breath work. Is that we are required to continue the diving deep and invited to keep growing. And so, given that, our ability to hold space for others, have presence for others, and trust, this is one of the most important things, trust their own inner healing wisdom begins to stretch and grow. And it allows us, and it's permission giving. Even if we don't say it with our words, our own presence is permission giving for others to trust themselves and go deep. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's part of it. Our mindset in this work is that every person, that every breather is the expert of their own self. They can trust their own inner healing wisdom. And in that way it becomes very self-empowering. And if we have any need as human beings, which is normal for human beings to have needs of control and to feel good about themselves and sort of this sort of more ego stance, that's okay. That's part of the human game here. But we have to keep dying to that. And so I think that's probably a big piece of it is that our own requirement to have presence for others requires us to continue growing. It's always about us continuing to die and be reborn and to live in the world in a certain way. I mean, we don't have to, but if we're going to be able to hold space for others where we don't get triggered, our own stuff doesn't come so up in our face that we become incapacitated or sort of frozen in our capacity to hold space for others. And that's not a criticism. We expect that to happen because we're human beings and we have had life experience. We've had traumas and we've had experiences which cloud our vision of who we are, and we can get triggered by other people. To me, that's the beauty and the absolute sort of freezing fear place as being a human being on planet Earth is it's the good news, bad news of that is that relational piece of who we are. We're part of it. And the only person we have control of is ourselves. At least we think we do. And the only way we can kind of unfold and be able to wear our experiences loosely like a big t-shirt and not get too attached to our life experiences is to continue to do this work and have these death rebirth experiences. It's a long-winded answer to that question. Sorry.
No, no, it's great. No, it's what came up for me as you were talking about it, it's almost like the traumas and the things that we've experienced in the in our life, whether they feel like big T traumas, big shock episodes, or just the things that we experienced relationally and developmentally are those things that need to die off in their own time. And at the same time, it's almost like that's how we're sort of propelled through the world, right?
Mhm.
Like those are the
Mhm.
things that we get to encounter and have the chance to let go of in the breath work on the mat so that we can be reborn and with this new space and as this sort of more embodied being.
That's right. And it's not to sort of make small our traumas. Our traumas,
Right.
it's important. I was just listening this morning to from the Christian tradition, Father Richard Rohr, who I've been really fascinated with right now, because he's actually talking about more of a holotropic paradigm through the lens of the Christian mystics, which I just think is like, oh, that's interesting because I have a Buddhist lean. The Buddhist lens
Right.
fits well with this, but if
Yeah.
you look at more of the mystical traditions, it's saying the same thing. exactly the same thing, just with different somatics. And so, yeah, it's not to make them little, like, oh, you it's about really embodying them, really expressing them, really going back and having the full experience, not just the cognitive memory of it, but a full embodied emotional and physical experience of our life traumas, be them traumas of what Stan describes of commission, the things that happened to us that shouldn't have, or traumas of omission, the things we didn't get that we really needed to be a healthy, emotional human being on planet Earth. And it's not about saying, oh, those things aren't important, like push them away. That's not it. It's about fully, expressing them, reliving them. And then it absolutely dissipates the energy in our psyche with that. And
Yeah,
then it becomes, oh, yes, this happened to me. Yes, it's true. I didn't get those needs met, but they don't have any physical or emotional charge like they did before we did the deep work. And so when they come up in our daily lives relationally, we just kind of almost smile and go, oh, there it is again. I feel you, but I'm not overtaken by the overwhelm of that unconscious, that experience. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. I like the Buddhist frame of, sort of things covering up this Buddha nature that we all are, right? So all these things that we've accumulated, and then from the trauma lens, from like the nervous system lens, trauma being something that it is a part of life, but that w- that completion process hasn't happened. Like that's what's missing. That's
Mhm.
what creates the re-triggering or the re-experiencing is this process, this natural process that's just trying to reach its natural state of completion. And somewhere
Mhm.
along the line, it's getting stuck, whether that's through overwhelm and fear or just denial. Like we're not loving that part or not accepting that this is also a part of my experience.
Mhm.
And yeah, there was something that came up that we talked about during the module, within me, really sitting with a very deep kind of wound of this perfectionist and having a chance to really sit with that in a very uncomfortable way sometimes, and then working with it on the mat, working with it during the breathwork session. And during the breathwork session, there was almost like this inner funeral for this part. And
Mhm.
then when I went back home, I, went to my therapist and was telling her about it. And we started to do some somatic work around it. It was still fresh, right? And as I was sort of revisiting it, she was asking me, "Well, what are you noticing right now?" Because I was telling her what I felt like I took away from the breath work was like I'm free of this. Like this is finished. I don't have to live out this pattern anymore. And immediately what came up was, first grief, like still sort of grieving that part, but also like this doubt of who do you think you are that this is actually done, you
Mhm.
know? And in that moment, it was just acceptance. Like, okay, like I see you and it's not that you can't come around anymore, but I'm just going to love you and
Mhm.
hug myself and really
Mhm.
like lean in and take care of that part instead of it being something that I'm trying to hide or be ashamed
Mhm.
of
That's right.
or get angry about. Oh, I thought I dealt with this. Like we did
Mhm.
a breathwork session and paid for a therapist, and why is this still coming up again? And
Mhm.
that's a very familiar experience for me is like, seriously, we're back here again. Like, I thought we dealt with this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that sort of it's such an our cognitive is so, sort of hardwired into thinking sort of that scientific industrial civilization model of like, okay, you do this, then there, then you do this and there. And it's not like that at all. It's much more spiral in nature and sort of like, oh, I'm visiting you again. Hi, dear friend. And, I'm a firm believer, and thanks to the science of the sort of the emphasis on the whole neurobiology and the science and the scientific studies of some people like Kristen Neff and that whole group who worked with the science of self-compassion. I really believe that those practices of self-compassion are the antidote for a lot of these sort of self-criticism and that sort of linear thing we've been sort of taught or learned in our daily society socially to think, oh, well, that should be done, and then be hard on ourselves around that. And then comes all the shame and the guilt and all the other emotional pieces that are attached to it. And yeah, I think absolutely. They become good friends. Stan coined what other people call patterns, life patterns. Jung calls complexes from the Buddhist traditions, more samsaras, samskaras, is those sort of patterns of our lives. Stan calls coexes, which are system of condensed experiences. And what we find is we begin to work with these coexes, these patterns that are created by our life experiences, our birth experiences, maybe our transpersonal experiences. People will ask Tav a lot, like, well, can we ever get rid of, again, a sort of a Western thought, get rid of these patterns or these coexes? And he used to describe it, and I agree with this, my own personal experiences, they become more echoes. Like they're not like, I hate to use the word haunting us or like driving us or unconsciously sort of driving us through the world, and we begin to like look around the world from that viewpoint. We become like a little bit lighter with it all. And so when they show up again, we go, oh, there you are again. I missed you. Where were you? You know what I mean? Like, because they are part of who we are. It is part of our nature. And so I think you've seen me do this hand gesturing a lot in the training, Jonathan, but, you know, anytime we go, I need to get rid of that and I want to keep this is really what can cause our dis-ease as living life as a human being on planet Earth. It's more that feminine perspective, and I don't mean female, I mean feminine perspective of opened arm and going, okay, welcoming it all and having curiosity around, oh, well, what's that about? Or, oh, I see you again. I know you really well with some of our life patterns. Or maybe we discover something and we're like, wow, where were you hiding under a rock? And how do we know that we're dealing with that? We have an overwhelming physical and emotional response to things, to situations, to people, and then that's our big barometer.
As you're listening to this amazing conversation, take a moment to notice what's coming up for you around the theme of trusting yourself. When it comes to exploring expanded states through plant medicines, entheogens, or breath work, trusting yourself to take that leap isn't always easy. That's why I created the Psychedelic Readiness Self Assessment, a free tool to help you honestly evaluate where you're at on your journey. Even if you're not ready yet, it'll highlight areas for growth and offer specific steps to help you prepare for deeper work. You'll find the link on the show page, or if you'd prefer a more personal touch, reach out to book a free discovery call. Let's explore where you are and how I can support you from here.
The divine wisdom that we have this body and we have this heart and brain that, emotions come up. This is our big barometer. And it's always with us. And all we have to do is pay attention to it. Now, that sounds really easy, but a lot of us are halfway dissociated from our bodies. So it's hard to feel because it is not safe for many of us to feel our bodies because of things that have happened to us. And so the more we can trust our bodies, we can trust our emotions, we can trust and trust ourselves, then it becomes a great barometer to see how we're doing. How's how are we doing? Instead of going, no, get rid of, we go, well, how am I doing? And I joke a lot in the training, like if you want to know how well you're doing, go home for Thanksgiving or go to the places where you're most triggered by the people you're most triggered by and see how at ease you feel, how much you feel that you have to protect yourself. Now, it's not bad if you have to do any of that. Good on you. It's a great barometer to see how we're doing on this journey. This isn't a destination. This is a journey of our own self discovery and understanding.
I love the idea of the spiral. That's something that I relate to as well, is yeah, maybe from the top down, it might look like you're going around in a circle, but when
Mhm.
you bring in that extra dimension, you can see that it's really a spiral and that you're meeting these, experiences, these coexes, from a different place and a different perspective each time, and
That's right.
yeah, I love that. Um, so just to maybe like back up a second and give people a little bit more perspective, because I think if you're familiar with the show, definitely you've heard me talk about Stan Groff, and that's been a big influence on my own work. Um, and Stan, of course, created or helped to. Yeah, I like the way that you put it, that he helped to midwife in the holotropic breathwork with his first wife, Christina. Um, but then you also got to work with his protege, Tav Sparks, and I know that Tav was a big influence on you. Um, can you talk a little bit about like maybe what you learned from both of them, how they were different,
Mhm.
um, and how they influenced you and the way that you bring the work into the world?
Yeah, I feel really lucky because I did get to know both of them and work with both of them. And, Stan is just this incredible man and scientist. And, his brain, his capacity, his knowledge in his brain is like pretty mind boggling. And with that is this just really human being. But he's very, I often say in the training, like, we are all kind of oriented from different places, I feel. Like some of us enter the world through our cognitive, and some more from our emotion and our hearts, and more in our body. And so I would say what I learned most from Stan was just the importance of having curiosity, n- you know, al- allowing ourselves to learn, continue learning, and part that's part of the curiosity, and then courage. I'll never forget on my sort of exit interview with him, which everybody got when you're certified, you get a sort of an hour with the lead person, and that was Stan then. And I was just talking about how difficult I found bridging because I'm in the Western medical model in my daily life, working as a family practitioner and bridging the holotropic perspective into that. And he just shared how hard that was for him and how alone he felt in when he was trying to introduce the holotropic perspective into science, the scientific realms, and how lonely it was, how he was, actually kind of nervous about it because he could get blackballed and been been told he was crazy, and I saw his humanity of how much courage that took to trust his own knowing that this actually was a truth. He had had his own experience of it, and he had worked with others. So I think what I learned from Stan was the importance of continuing to learn, reading books, reading, learning new ways of working with people and holding space for others, and having the courage to step out there to speak, to even if my colleagues might, who I work maybe in a clinic, go, "Well, Diana's a little nutty," you know, and having the courage to go, "Yeah, you know what? I am a little nutty. Join the club if you'd like," sort of that sort of thing. And then TAV, I probably worked a little more with TAV. I did more of my traveling abroad teaching with TAV. And TAV was, he had that brain, not like Stan, okay, but he had the brain. But really, he was like a poet at heart. His heart was just huge. Now, his curiosity was huge as well. And he was just he melded together that sort of cognitive with the heart, and then, offered it from his understanding, in my opinion, from more of the mystical of our mystical nature. That's how I feel. And he completely embodied this work. So his teaching was completely using his whole body. It was embodied. It was coming from his heart, but he still had that important, crucial piece of the cognitive. And he studied. I mean, he was a big reader of, different mystical traditions from different, mystical backgrounds. And yeah, and yet they were both very human. Like it was like, they didn't want to be, have be a guru. They were great teachers, but they were like, no, this is the only guru in this place is everybody's own inner self. Their own inner healing wisdom is their own deep teacher. We're here to support that. And yeah, I think my teaching style is more from the nature of TAV. In my opinion, I feel like I try to, when I get with a group, the first thing I try to do after I've studied a lot, and you guys probably think I'm crazy, but every time I teach, I study. I look over the material, I read and some of parts of Tav and Stan's books again, and because that I feel is my responsibility as a teacher. And then when I get there with you, I try to let it go and just be open to the group and the group energy, and then allow things to emerge from me, that hopefully are things that people can absorb and learn and trust for themselves, for themselves. Like it allows it to emerge from themselves. So yeah, they were, and they were human. Oh God, loved movies. One I'll never forget. We went to movie in San Francisco. I went out there. Tav and I used to get together for a week and do breath work. We'd sit for each other every year, to try to do some deep work. And but we'd get together with Christina and Dan and go to movies. And I remember I was coming from the bathroom getting ready for a movie, and I could see Stan at the popcorn stand. He had a big old barrel of popcorn. And he looked just like a little kid. He had it in his arm with his drink, and he was going back to his seat. And, I thought no one would realize that he's this world teacher, that he has shared with this world probably the most written about working in non-ordinary states. He's just a man, a little boy wanting his popcorn and drink to watch a movie, sort of, that sort of look to him. And, I think that's just the beauty, that they really were human. They really were who they are, with their own sort of interesting natures and their own egos and their own, in all of that, they were able to have the capacity to go out there in the world and really teach and support people. Yeah. So I think that was it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful, place to get to in life, right? Because like, I have that experience. I get to see you in this one dimension where you're at work essentially, right? And
Mhm.
you're there and you're embodying the school, the modality, the work that you're trying to impart to us. And I relate to that um, you touched on it earlier, is like just the way that you're showing up because of the work that you do. Um, I get to observe that even as a like a sitter, right? Like, oh, I'm watching how the facilitators are walking the floor, watching how they're supporting the breathers and learning from that, just sort of soaking it up by observing and soaking up your presence. And yeah, like you're also a human being, right? And that is such a, I think, a pitfall of people looking for transformation and change right now in the world, is latching on to gurus or teachers that maybe are not in right relationship with what they're teaching. And you know whether it's the student or the teacher or both are kind of losing sight of of the goal, or of that right relationship. So first of all, I appreciate and thank you for sharing those
Mhm.
stories. And yeah, there is this balance between being human and also being a part of a lineage, and that's another thing that I take from sort of the my Buddhist experience, is the value of one the lesson or the work being passed from one person to the next, and how important that is. And that's something that I appreciate about holotropic breathwork, is like it isn't new, like you're saying, it's really pulling in these different traditions and these different wisdom, and to be able to synthesize that into something that's still fresh and vibrant and relatable to people is, I think, just an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. It's really served me well as a human being on planet Earth through rough times and good times. Oh, yeah.
Mm. What are the ways that you find that you're still integrating your own work? Or, like, is there something that you could share that, is alive to you, and, in the work that you're still doing? Because before we hit record, you were telling me you just, did a breathwork session,
Yeah.
and that's such a inspiring thing to hear.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I had a consultation with someone in the training yesterday morning, and they asked me, what are the gold nuggets, that you would say after you're certified? And I was like, okay, well, first of all, I have done so much more work. Even being in the training is a lot of work, and people often ask, well, why do you have so many requirements? Why do we have to breathe so much? It's because until we've breathed enough and we've done enough of our own work, we're going to get triggered too much to be able to hold space for others. We will, and this is human nature, try to get our unconscious needs met by the group, by an individual in the group, or by the group as a whole. So we have to do our own work. But so there's a lot of work before you're certified. But I hate to tell everybody, but that is just like the very tip of the iceberg. I mean, I have done so much more work on myself since I was certified to this day. And I wish I actually had more opportunity to breathe than I do. And um, and I know that a lot of facilitators in the world, they utilize a lot of different modalities, which I think is really important. I often on periods of time see therapists, different types of therapists. Um, a lot of us will, dabble in medicine work, try that. And I think there is something important about us going back to our own roots, which is go just laying our, excuse my language, ass down on a mat and friggin' breathing and going inside. And so I think I'm continually I mean, I think life is integration. I think I mean, I see a lot of people having these huge experiences, whether it's from the psychedelic using plant medicines or other modalities to enter these states or different breath works or doesn't drumming or whatever it is. And you have these incredible experiences sometimes, or very deep, powerful, like soul wrenching memory reliving experience. It doesn't matter, up, down, in, out, whatever the experience is it's all for naught if it doesn't help us be able to relate to each other in a more human way, in a more open-armed way. So to me, like people will say, well, how do you integrate that? It's like, okay, well, you know, first of all, pray your ass off or meditate your ass off, whatever you need to do to stay grounded. It's not about staying out there. I mean, if we wanted to be out in the archetypal realms of our nature, we could be using psychedelics every day, but that is not going to help us be a better human being on planet Earth. And that's actually what we're doing. This is what we're doing right now. We're doing human being relating. And so why not allow that to help us relate better? And I don't mean just to the people in our own households, which is important, but I mean everybody. I mean, the man on the street, the president of the United States, the whomever if we cannot, as hard as it is, do this and go, wow, okay, aren't we living in interesting times right now? And being aware of our own responses and working with them and doing our best not to do this as best we can. I mean, for a lot of us, that is the hope. That is the hope for planet Earth. That is the hope for human beings. And so I think life is integration. Now, that doesn't mean you don't stop, maybe do artwork, take walks. I live out in the country, so I have a lot of loading wood, carrying wood, bringing it in the house, building fires, doing practical body and then also just working with our emotions. If creating the space, if our life is so busy, we keep ourselves so busy, we don't have room to even know what we feel, that is not going to help our integration. So we have to create the space to feel what we're feeling. And again, not push it away, not try to hang on to all the good stuff and push away at fears, but just to hold everything. I love what Jack Kornfield used to say is in one of his teachings, um, we used to, Stan and Groff and Jack Kornfield used to do a week long together called um, Insight and Opening. So in the morning, Jack Kornfield would do teachings on meditation, and then the afternoons we'd do breath work. And Jack used to say, if about being committed to a daily practice of meditation is really important. But if you're sitting there on your pillow, say, with your timer for 30 minutes and your 4-year-old daughter comes and says, Daddy, come play with me, or Mommy, come play. And you're like, no, I'm meditating. That is not the practice. If she comes to you and you go play with her, guess what? That is your meditation for the day. That is relating with others. So it's, if we get too sort of like rigid around what a daily spiritual practice is or how we stay connected to the truth of who we are, then we miss the opportunity for what the real truth of what is the gold that comes from those integrative practices is how we relate to one another. So it's like this dance. See, nothing's rigid. It's all malleable. It's like a piece of clay. It's like water, It's like when we find ourselves hanging onto the shore, we got to let go, It's like, okay, what is today going to bring? And then, if my sister comes over and says, spend the day with me, and I'm rigid about what I think I need to do, then we got to let it go. We go, I guess this is my integration today. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Or if you're, you're sitting still and you're quiet and serene for 30 minutes, and then the other 23 and a half hours, you're, you know, chaotic and a hot mess. Well, how good is that as well?
That's right.
I always say, like, yeah, the point of meditation, and same thing with breath work, is not to become a better breath work, you know, practitioner. It's not to breathe better. Like,
Right.
how am I bringing that out into the rest of my life?
That's
And
right.
I had that exact Jack Cornfield experience the other day. I got up, I was getting ready to do my meditation. The cat came in, who never comes in my room at this time, and was just being very needy. And so, yeah, it could have been like, okay, shoo her out of the room and close the door so I can meditate. And instead, hey, come up on the couch. And she sat on my lap. And I thought, okay, this is my meditation here. It's just
That's right.
being with her, and, listening to her purring, and, just enjoying being in this moment. And yeah, we gotta meet life where it is. And
That's right.
the other thing that kind of came up is, uh, you know, earlier we were talking about the death and rebirth. And I think for me, when I have those big moments of death and rebirth, it's creating that space for something new to grow and to
Mm,
flourish.
mhm,
And as I've done my own work, I have also discovered that it's not just in those big moments. I don't need to go for a week-long breathwork training to have those experiences. It's how can I continue to cultivate that new growth and that space for what I want to create and the way that I want to show up in the world every day. And those bigger opportunities are a blessing and a reminder and a way to reset and kind of,
mm, mm,
reorient, and okay, what wants to come through now? What direction are we going in, or what season is sprouting, now? But yeah, both things are really important.
mm, mm. Absolutely.
And I love what you said about, and I know you mentioned it during the last training. And by the way, for the listeners, I also want to mention that one of the things that I find that's really cool about the GTT and the holotropic facilitator training is that these training modules are offered to anyone. Like, you don't
Mhm,
necessarily have to commit to, I want to be a breathwork facilitator, to come and experience not only just the breathwork itself, but these really profound, amazing teachings that are great for, especially for people that are interested in holding space, or doing psychedelic work.
mhm,
There's a lot of therapists that end up finding their way into the
mhm,
circles, but I think it's just good for people in general. But you said, um, you kind of touched on one of the things you just shared about, like, that the training is just the beginning, and that you've learned so much after, just going and doing the work and practicing and leading modules and workshops and breath work and things like that. And it's such a good reminder for me. Um, I think it's something I try to really remember all the time, is like, and I see it in other people, and I'm not judging them. I have been in this space too, where it's like, well, once I get this next certification, then I'll be ready. Or I have to go
mhm.
do this training so that I can get to the next step. And it's like, I also agree with you that I've learned more from going out and getting my hands in the dirt and, practicing, just as much as, learning from a book or a teacher, or, going through lectures and going through a certification process. And I'm also very grateful that there's that practice element in the trainings that I've done as well. It's not just, hey, read this book, or, study this lecture. no, you got to go and put your butt on the cushion or, lay down on the
Mhm.
mat, whatever it is, and really have that experience. And I think the sort of common phrase that I hear get thrown around a lot in relation to this is like, you can only take people as deep as you've been yourself, or you can only meet people
That's
at
right.
that level that you've been to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and people know it. I mean, the thing about working in expanded states is it's expanded. So there's a certain sort of knowing of the participant that is it's not it's not, you know, it's expanded. So, you can't bullshit your way through basically, being a facilitator. And that's, in the training, I don't know if I've said this lately, but, if someone asks you a question and you don't know, you don't bullshit your way through it. You just go, I don't know. Tav was great at this, borrowing from the AA tradition is like, all we have to offer others is our own experience, strength, and hope. And I think that's true. And being honest when we don't know something is equally, I mean, I think again, from the Western model or the industrial model, like, what do you mean you don't know? Well, then you must be, it's this judging about what we know. And that I think in this work is so paradoxical in that way. There's no reason we have the best thing is to be transparent and transparent in not like, oh, take care of me. You know how some people they're oversharing their own selves in the hopes to get taken care of. That's different than being transparent in just a really open-hearted, real way, not out of need for something to be given back to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. You were saying earlier about like, the things that the unfulfilled needs show up in the room or show up when you're facilitating. So yeah, like if I'm still sort of attached to this particular experience and that need, that might show up as well. In
Mhm.
a group. Um, I, I'll give you an example from my own life. I there was a breathwork circle I was leading online just recently, and most of the people that I breathe with are regulars. And so there's times where, like today, for instance, I said, hey, there's no breath work next week because I'm traveling for a training. Oh, where are you going? Right. Like I'm not volunteering that information, but they're curious. Right. So there was a
Mhm.
moment in the integration circle, and I felt like, gee, it would be really nice to share the mandalas that I just did during this recent module. And even though there was this thought of, yes, to inspire people to continue to do their own integration work, and look how cool it is to do art as a part of the breathwork process. I really paused myself and was like, "Well, wait, why is this important right
Right.
now? Are you making
Right.
this about you when you're the one holding space and facilitating for others?" And so, no, okay, we can, you know, that's gonna just stay over here to the side. I don't need to
That's
to
right.
bring to bring that in. But having that awareness and not being overwhelmed by the, oh no, like I'm just trying to help them do their own integration work and inspire, them to maybe try something different besides journaling or going outside for a walk or something like that. Look how cool it is to do art. So yeah, having that discernment.
Yeah, and it's tricky. Ooh, there's a thin
Right.
line. You know what I mean? It's so
Yeah.
tricky. And you're right. We just it's like we have to always question ourselves. We just have to. It's just crucial because it's easy. It's a slippery slope for sure.
I
Mhm.
I think one of the things I've learned from you that I really appreciate though is that it's all welcome. Like it's the inquiry that's important. It's not, oh, I have to show up here in a certain way or I have to
Mhm.
hide the things. that I feel ashamed about or that feel edgy or sticky or, messy about myself. There's been times when I've been talking to you or sharing in a group where there's this narrative inside that's like, this isn't safe to share. And if I do,
Mhm.
I'm going to be judged or ostracized or kicked out of the training or, no, no, well, oh, you said that. Well, you're definitely not ready to, be, helping other people. And every time that I take that risk, I'm met with support and like, yeah, you're a human being. Like, of course you have those feelings. And to me, that's been one of the most integrative parts of, being, a part of the GTT training is like really learning to trust myself that I can show up and I don't have to be perfect.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if we had to be perfect, none of us would be doing this because none of us are, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm. For sure.
Yeah, I think maybe that's one of the things, and this is a maybe a touchy situation because yeah, there are definitely things that this person wasn't perfect, but it's one of the things that I appreciated about Chogyam Trungpa is like showing up sort of warts and human, flaws and all, and still being a very profound teacher.
Yeah.
Um, I found that a lot in the last few years of discovering different Buddhist teachers, whether it's Chogyam Trungpa or Chuladasa or there's another one that who's escaping me that was, sort of ostracized, but was a very somatic based teacher, and like that's right up my alley. Where I'm like, oh, you know what? If 20 years ago, when I first started getting into Buddhism, I would have just thrown these books out and said, no, no, like this person isn't, living up to this perfect ideal. And now I can go, I don't necessarily want to go to this person's events, but it doesn't mean that the wisdom that they're sharing isn't valuable. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that I can't learn something from this book,
Mhm.
that is transcendent of the human and their flaws,
That's right.
whoever wrote it.
Yeah.
To me, there's a lot of growth there.
Yeah, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right,
We can
right.
take absolute the teachings with I mean, I think that's one of the other really important pieces of the holotropic breathwork that Tab brought in was this idea of, from a more it's called more commonly known in psychological circles as projection or, you know, uh transference or countertransference, and he calls more the awareness positioning system where we're projecting, we're everything around us, and that it's all about if we can bring it back to ourselves and really work with the actual projection that saves us from a lot of this. I think that rigidness around, like, oh well, now I learn anything from that teacher because they're an asshole and they hurt people, right? Well, okay, well, they were a human being and they did some really not okay things. And it's not a either or, it's a yes and yes. And they were also really quite amazing teachers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Life's pretty complex and multidimensional in
Oh
that
my
way.
God. And full of paradox. I mean, if we need our lives and the world not to be paradoxical, we're in trouble because it is filled to the brim with paradox. And it makes us have, I mean, well, we, doesn't make us do anything, but we have the opportunity to really face our own, like, ah, there you are, rigidness, hi, yeah, okay. And, I mean, in some ways, it's so fascinating and interesting to be a human being on planet Earth. Like, what an opportunity if we're awake to it and or willing to at least open our eye a little and be halfway awake. It's just fascinating as heck, to to see the how nature is offering us, I mean, literally nature is offering us so many ways to learn about our spiritual nature and this the nature of spirit, both, that relational piece of it. Mm, mm,
Yeah. I'm like you. I'm probably a little bit more in the city than you are, but it's being it's having the nature that's so accessible, that's really kept me in Tucson. Like
mm, mm,
that's what I love about it is it's right there and it's so close and I can get into it so quickly. And especially once I started to do, inner work or, have a spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it, that became so important to me is just being able to get away and be still and move in that rhythm of nature, to just
mm, mm.
hear wind and trees and animals and, you know, be still in that way. Um, it's been a very powerful experience for me. And sometimes like the I found that the transpersonal can even emerge in those spaces,
Mm, mm,
especially around the cactus here,
mm,
that these
mm.
ancient sort of spirits that, have been here for many of our lifetimes. There's a lot to be learned and to listen there.
Absolutely. I mean, when people go, well, it's just a rock or it's just a cacti or it's just a tree, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like some great teacher right there in front of us if we allow ourselves to be open enough to be awake to that. Yeah. I love the cacti down by where you are. I just feel like they're such characters. I just find them as little not
Yeah,
little, huge characters. And, you know, I do. I feel so humbled, not just because you get poked by them, but because they're, I can't help but be humbled, you
yeah.
know, by them. And it's just such deep teachers all around us, all around us. Mhm.
One of the things that I started to notice when I started hiking more is it seems like there's a higher probability of the saguaro cactuses that are really close to the trail, that they're um, more impacted. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because it's not like somebody's like just putting their hands all over a cactus.
Mhm.
But so why is that? Like, why is this one that is so close to where humans are passing by and walking so much more, I don't even wanna say damaged, but, like, weathered and, like, affected than the one that's out on the hill that, no one has gotten near for probably hundreds of years, right? And
Mhm.
it made me curious about, are these spirits, like, soaking up or, like,
Mhm.
interacting with us in a way that maybe we're not, conscious of or perceiving?
Yeah.
And you're right, like, there are cactus that have almost become like friends. Like, when I
Mhm.
see them, it's like, "Hey, uncle," "Hey,
Yeah.
grandfather," like, "Good to see you again," and just being able to hang out with them and kinda soak that up is a real privilege for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting to do an experiment, right? Have a trail and say you can only go on this trail if you talk kindly to the cactus.
Mm,
Only kindly, and then the other one, nothing. And it would be curious. I mean, I think, they've done studies with plants where, you talk to the plant, oh, you beautiful plant, you look beautiful today. How are you? And how it flourishes and, versus one that you say bad things to and how it, I mean, if how is that not living? And that's not a human being, but it is alive as a human being, and it's in its nature. And so it is just we're just indigenous cultures have so much to teach. We have so much to learn from indigenous cultures because to them that's just like, well, but of course, like even our curiosity is like, well, it's like we're little tiny children, in comparison to our inability to be awake to this, to that truth. Yeah, it's very interesting. We have so much to learn. We're just little babies, really.
We are, and especially when we're sitting with, like you said, the rocks or these cacti that are just absolutely ancient
Mm.
in
Mm.
comparison to us. I've often thought, like, I wonder what they think about us. Like, it's like we're just sort of there and we're gone in a blink of an eye,
Yeah.
Like the difference of scale and time, things like
Mm.
that.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, I just wanna take the opportunity to say thank you for your time, and also just to say, I appreciate you sharing so much about Stan and Tav because, one of the things that, makes me sad from time to time is that I don't get to experience their teaching directly, and I'm grateful to be able to, to soak it up through you. And in the same way that you were saying, that Tav and Stan have affected your own teaching and the way that you teach, um, I have moments where, I feel like, "Oh, what would Diana do here?" Or, I can feel the Dianaism kinda coming through me, when I'm, facilitating myself. So, I I am grateful for that, and I just wanna say thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a way to close, and I think we've been talking about vital points throughout this whole conversation, but the name of the show is The Vital Point, and that came from Dzogchen Buddhist teaching about the three statements that strike the vital point. And my vital point is usually that regardless of the methods we're talking about, that the important thing is to practice and to actually apply what we're learning. Is there something in your life or your work or even that has come up as result of this conversation that you would want to share as your vital point for today?
I think the vital point is trust yourself. Really trust your own knowing when you feel it deep within you, no matter what's being said around you or being influenced, that we are able to trust ourselves and turn toward that. Trust it. That would be probably in a encapsulated way. We have the ability to trust ourselves. If all the noise gets quieted, if all the outside expectation and our life experiences get all sort of synthesized a little more, and the walking through the world, trusting ourselves, and then we go from there.
So we will put the link for the GTT for the Groff transpersonal training with this episode.
That's probably the best place to go,
Yeah.
is the GTT. Yeah.
Yeah, Diana has led some really amazing modules that I've been a part of. You said the music module was your first one, which was cool that you taught. We had a quite an exciting music module last year,
Oh,
and
yeah, we did.
yeah, and so, yeah, if you go to the GTT website, you can see the whole calendar of workshops and trainings and see the modules that she's teaching at. Definitely recommend that you, attend. So, Diana, I really wanna thank you again for your time and for sharing your experience and wisdom.
Absolutely. My absolute honor. Thank you for the invitation. And everybody out there on the podcast world, trust yourself, go out and have a good day. Enjoy life. Enjoy yourself.
I hope you found something valuable in this episode. If it resonated, I'd really appreciate it if you left a quick review. It's a simple way to support the show and help more people find these conversations. Be sure to sign up for my newsletter at bluemagicalchemy.com for updates, exclusive content, and curated music to support your inner work. And remember, it's not about the method or the pace at which you're traveling. It's about consistently showing up and practicing. The vital point is to stay on the path wherever it takes you. If you feel called to share your journey, your questions, or your wins, I'm just a message away. Let's keep growing together. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, keep breathing, keep exploring, and keep practicing, because that's the vital point.